Tonight, I was at Folsom High School, shooting some high school football action in the wind and the rain, soaked to the bone, and yet I was still warmer than the Sacramento Kings were in 60-degree Los Angeles tonight. There's cold, and then there's blizzard freezing. That's what the Kings were from the floor, at least in the first half tonight in Inglewood. We'll react to everything as the Kings fall to 0-2 in NBA Cup play, which means essentially they've been eliminated. You are listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor for ABC 10 News here in Sacramento. That was the reason why I was out watching high school football. And so many of you told me, hey, Matt, it's a good thing you were out there, even in the wind and rain, so you didn't have to watch that first half of basketball. Well, unfortunately, it's my job. I had to go back and watch it. And truth be told, I don't know if it's easier or harder to watch it when I already knew that it was an abysmal first half. But my God, were the Sacramento Kings ice cold from the field to start that game. Actually, the first couple minutes of the game were great. Kings got off to an 8-2 start. Domantas Sabonis looked fantastic in his first couple of possessions back from his back injury. Of course, DeMar DeRozan returns on the day that Kendrick Lamar drops a new album. It's like it was meant to be and may have even been pre-planned. I have no idea. Not saying that DeMar was hurt, but with DeMar going to Inglewood and playing the Kings, the Kings playing the Clippers at the Intuit Dome, maybe, just maybe, Kendrick was intentional about releasing his album today. Or maybe not. I have no idea. I'm literally looking for anything else to blab about and talk about so I can avoid talking about that ice-cold start to the game for as long as possible. 29 points in the first half. Y'all, we've seen the Sacramento Kings score 29 points in the first 8 minutes of a game before. 29 points in the first half is tragic. Tragic. 12 points in the first quarter, 19% shooting from the field, 11% from three-point range. 17 points in the second quarter, 30% from the field, 12% from three-point range. In the first half, the Kings shot 24% from the field and 11% from three-point range. For the game, the Kings, thank God, woke up offensively in the second half. They scored as many points in the first 9 minutes of the third quarter as they did the entire first half. It's a miracle, really, the Kings even got to 88 points, considering they only scored 29 in the first half of this game. But for the game, the Kings shot 38% from the field, but 20%, 7 of 30 from three-point range. Once again, three-point shooting is terrible. And then the free throw shooting even plummeted a little bit to where the Kings used to be. 70% from the free throw line, 17 of 24 from the stripe. Again, there's going cold. Teams go cold at times in stretches of the game. But Sacramento has a tendency to just go ice cold, frigid, and it is infectious for everybody. The Kings could not hit a shot to save their lives. And it wasn't just from the three-point line like it's been an issue the entire season. The Kings have been one of the best teams in the league at overall field goal percentage, meaning when they're shooting inside the free throw arc, or the three-point line, they're typically hitting those shots. Well, that wasn't the case tonight. Let me tell you what bothers me the most about this game. I want to say that these offensive struggles are just, I wish I could chalk it up to, DeRozan has missed the last few games. Domantas Sabonis has missed the last couple of games. You're reincorporating these guys and trying to plug them back in. And, it's just a one game of those guys getting back. And the first half was the feeling out period again as everybody got reacclimated with one another. I wish I could do that and just brush it under the rug. But I can't, because What happened tonight is more of the same of what we've seen throughout this season so far when the Kings have been pretty much at full strength. I say pretty much because Malik Monk still isn't playing and hasn't played for a decent chunk of this season. But DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, they've played for the vast majority of this season outside the last couple of games. And we saw the Kings immediately revert back to some of the mistakes that they were making earlier on in the season. Now, what's weird is, you look at these past 5 games, and the Kings are 2-3 over these past 5 games. And I would argue that maybe tonight's a bad example. I'll say the 4 games before that. The Kings 2-2 in those 4 games. I would argue that in those 4 games, the Sacramento Kings were playing better basketball than they have at any point during the season. It just so happens that they lost a couple of really, really close games to Atlanta and to Minnesota, which that Minnesota game, as we know, was an instant classic with De'Aaron scoring 60 points, right? But the Kings were 2 games above 500 before that stretch. Now they are at 500 at this point in time, 8-8 after tonight's loss. I feel like the Kings, with DeRozan and Sabonis out, and well, Sabonis was playing in the Minnesota game. That was the game that he got hurt, and I felt the Kings were playing pretty good basketball and moving the ball really, really well in that game too. I just feel like the Kings still haven't shown with their top guys their ability to play their best. And again, it just felt like more of the same. The ball movement was not as crisp tonight. Mike Brown immediately, and I mean immediately, reverted back to heavy minutes for top guys, right? De'Aaron Fox plays 43 points. Domantas Sabonis and Keegan Murray each play 40 points. DeMar DeRozan plays 36 points. And the bench, which guys stepped up and played really, really solid over those handful of games that DeRozan and Sabonis were out. The bench was once again non-existent, just like they were to start this season. You got 9 total points from your bench, and 5 of them were from Colby Jones. Trey Lyles, who's been fantastic for the Kings over the last handful of games when he was starting in place of Sabonis. I think he had 3 of his last 4 games he was in double-digit scoring. He had 3 points in 18 minutes tonight. And I don't care about the rest of the stats. I don't care about the rebounding, the assists, the blocks, the steals, the turnovers, all that. I don't care because we're talking about scoring. 3 points in 18 minutes tonight. Keon Ellis, who's coming off a game where he hit 9 3-pointers and a career-high 30-plus points. While I wasn't expecting him to do that again, Keon Ellis had 1 point in 16 minutes. Jordan McLaughlin, who I thought had done a nice job carving out kind of a spot for himself and a niche for himself, and Mike Brown had started to discover, hey, this is how I can use Jordan McLaughlin effectively, especially with Malik Monk continuing to be out. Jordan McLaughlin, 0 points, but only played 7 minutes. So DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis come back, and Mike Brown immediately loses confidence in his bench, and the bench immediately loses their ability to score the basketball like they were able to do when they had to step up over the 2 games that those 2 stars were out. Why can this team not get on the same page? What is it about the top guys on this team that have to play heavy minutes because the bench is non-existent? Or what is it about the top guys playing that Mike Brown doesn't feel comfortable going away from them and relying on the bench? It's a combination of the two, but why can't this team figure it out? And on top of that, to make matters even worse, the supporting cast really struggled. I'm talking about the supporters in the starting lineup to the Kings' big 3. Keegan Murray tonight, 10 points, 4 of 11 shooting from the field, 2 of 5 from three-point range. He kind of got going offensively in the second half because in the first half, he was dreadful. And then you have Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter, 0 points, 0 of 5 from the field, 0 of 4 from three-point range. From your 2 shooting guards, you got a combined 1 point out of them this entire game, right? What good is DeRozan and Fox and Sabonis and their ability to draw attention and draw a crowd and touch the paint and spray out to shooters if those shooters cannot throw a ball into the ocean? It's so perplexing. It's so confusing, and it will continue to handicap this team. It's self-inflicted, right? I don't care what defenses are doing. Actually, I do care. Defenses are daring you to shoot and beat them from the perimeter, and you have not been able to do it with any sort of consistency so far this season. You are handicapping yourself. You are taking a primary strength. You are taking your primary strength, the main strength of this team offensively, and you're cutting the legs out from underneath it because you can't hit a freaking open three-point shot. It is so confusing with this group. And look, I love the fact that the Kings are never truly out of a game, right? The Kings battled back. They were down 25 in this game, got back to within single digits. It's not like they were knocking on the door and nearly completed the comeback in the final minutes because the Clippers did a good job of slamming the door shut when the Sacramento Kings really started to pull it open. So credit to the Clippers, who are now 2-0 against the Kings, by the way. But why does it take a 29-point first half to wake this team up? Why does it take a 25-point deficit to wake this team up? We've seen the Kings, I mean, even the Miami game, right? The Kings were behind pretty big in the Miami game, came roaring back, ended up winning that game. The Kings fall behind big to the Atlanta Hawks, came roaring back and nearly won that game in Sacramento, right? Like, why can this King, like, we know the Kings are never out of a game, which is great. That's awesome. But the Kings can't be reliant on, okay, we're now at the point of we have to get it started. We have to start playing. We have to start scoring. We have to wake up now or we have absolutely no chance. Why are they waiting for that point to get going? Why can't they be the best version of themselves when they're in a position where maybe they're only down by 6 points and then that best version of themselves goes on this massive run and puts the Kings up by 10? We've seen splashes and elements of that, but not consistently enough. And again, I think it falls back on the offense. This offensive issue is concerning at this point. I know we're only 16 games into the season, and for some reason, the numbers, and we'll dive into this in the next segment, the numbers, I think, are giving the Kings a little bit of a false sense of security. I'll dive more into that in just a second. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the app that you need to be using to buy your Kings tickets or concert tickets, other sporting event tickets, theatrical production tickets, comedy show, whatever it is. If it's a ticketed event, check Gametime first because more than likely they're going to have the right tickets for you or the tickets that you're looking for. And I can say extremely likely to guaranteed they will have the best prices. It's part of the Gametime guarantee. If you find tickets, the same tickets on a different site for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. That's how confident they are that they have the best deal. And look, I've vetted it. I've gone through it. I now only buy my tickets for whatever I'm going to through Gametime, because I've never found a better deal anywhere else. Gametime Picks is an amazing feature where if you click on your event, it'll sift through all the tickets and only show you the best deals in different areas to find your right price point so you don't have to waste time going through all those tickets. And time is so important with Gametime because the longer you wait, the more last minute it is, the better deals you're going to find on Gametime. Go and download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Are the Kings being too nonchalant about this offensive issue? And what I mean by that is you ask Mike Brown about it. You ask the Kings players about it. And it's like, we know shots will start falling. We believe shots will start falling. And God, I want to believe that. And part of me still does. It's like law of averages plus how good this team is. Like these shots are going to start falling, right? They have to start falling. The Kings are way too good to be this poor of shooters from three-point range. Keegan Murray at some point will have to wake up from three-point range. There's no way that he's this bad of a three-point shooter, right? And there's a lot of guys to start the season on the Kings roster that have been struggling shooting the basketball. So I want to just be able to say, yep, it'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll start falling eventually. And you know what? Maybe they will. And I hope that I can look back on this podcast and we can look back on the comment section and look back at Twitter from tweets after today's game and other games so far to start the season and go, man, we were freaking out and overreacting. Look how silly we look because the Kings offense was fine. It just took them a little while to get going. I really hope that's the case because I have no problem looking like a fool, looking like an idiot, looking like an overreactor if that means the Kings are winning basketball games and have figured this issue out. But I do think there is an element of the Kings are being dismissive or brushing the issue under the rug a little bit just by saying, they'll start falling eventually. Because, look, the numbers say that Sacramento has been a good offensive team. Not really good, not as good as they want it to be. The Kings right now, after tonight, they entered tonight's game, I think they were 10th in overall points per game. Now they're down to 11th in NBA points per game at 115.1. This is their third game out of 16 that they've been held under 100 points. It's not a ton, but it's worth noting, I think. The Kings are 6th overall in field goal percentage. They shoot as a team 48% from the field. But they're 24th in three-point percentage, shooting 33% as a team. And that number actually went up recently because it was worse than that. I look at those numbers, and I compare them to what the eye test is telling me. And again, maybe this is adding emotion to a statistic, and that's not a thing. Stats are facts. They're not emotions. They're not like opinions. It feels, and I know I'm not alone in this, it feels like those numbers are not inflated because they're true, but those numbers are masking a real concern with this Kings team. Because on nights where the offense is rolling, it's really rolling and it looks good, right? Top half of the league. Although I would argue 11th is way too low for the Sacramento Kings. They need to be top 5. They need to be top 5. But 11th isn't terrible. It's not like they're 15th or below. But it feels like they've had stretches where they are the worst offensive team in the league. Or it doesn't matter how talented they are because they cannot freaking hit shots. So my question is, at what point does it become too long to just simply wait it out? Or if you're not concerned about it right now, if Mike Brown's not concerned about it right now, the players aren't concerned about it right now because, they're going to start falling eventually. At what point does eventually run out of time? Because, look, 16 games out of an 82-game season, that's 19.5%. Round up, that's 20% of the season, less than a quarter of the season. There's still plenty of time left for the Sacramento Kings to work through this. However, in the West, time is not on your side. Because while the Kings are 8-8, and there are positives to being able to say this team is 500, they've been for the most part above 500, even though offensively they've not been as good as we know that they can be, and the three-point shooting has not been nearly as good as we expect it to be. There is a positive way to look at it. But there's also the reality of the Kings are 8-8. That's tied with the Spurs in terms of record in the 11th/12th spot. But in reality, you're in 12th because the Spurs beat you. So as of now, Spurs own the tiebreaker over you. Again, super early in the season, and I didn't expect to be standings watching 16 games in. And I'm not standings watching because I'm afraid, or I'm looking at the position that the Kings are at right now and going, oh God, the Kings are at risk of falling out of the play-in. I'm standings watching because with how competitive the freaking West is, while you're trying to wait for your shots to start falling, other teams can start to create so much of separation. And there could be so many teams between you and where you're trying to get to that by the time the shots do start falling, you're in too deep of a hole that you might not have enough time to make up. So, at what point does it become too late? 16 games is not that point. That's fine. You are only a game out of 6th place in the West, which is the final guaranteed playoff spot. That's fine. The problem is there are 6 other teams between where you're at now and that 6th spot. That's not fine. That's a lot of teams that are fighting you. You're in a mix of a lot of teams. You're in a hornet's nest in the Western Conference. And the longer this problem continues, and it's not showing any sign of improving. It hasn't. This has been a problem all preseason and all regular season with the exception of a couple of games. The Kings have had a drastic shooting issue. So at what point does it become too late? Because we can't even get to that point. Look, missing the playoffs for this Kings team is unacceptable, right? We can agree on that. And I'm not just saying that as a podcast host or as a media member. I'm repeating the sentiment of the owner of the Sacramento Kings, Vivek Ranadive, who was not happy at all with the Kings missing the playoffs last year. Completely unhappy about that. That was proven through the moves that the Kings made this offseason and the comments of Monty McNair and Mike Brown about making the playoffs, getting back to the playoffs. That is the expectation. That is the bare minimum for this Kings team. Once we get there, we can start talking about winning a playoff series and hopefully putting together a run. But right now, missing or making the playoffs is bare minimum expectation. Missing the playoffs, and I'm not talking about playing, I'm talking about getting a legit playoff series. Missing the playoffs is unacceptable for this team. And I'm telling you, the Kings will miss the playoffs if they can't figure their three-point shooting out. Because if they can't figure their three-point shooting out, they are handicapping themselves. They are stopping their offense from getting to where it could possibly be. They're stunting their own growth if they can't knock down shots. And I hope that we're not still talking about this 26 games into the season or 30 games into the season. Because if we are, now we're starting to talk about reaching the halfway point. And if the three-point shooting, unless the Kings are suddenly hopeful that, like the defense last year, the second half of the season, the three-point shooting is all of a sudden just going to explode. But again, in the Western Conference, you still might not have enough time because of how many teams are good in the competition in this conference. The NBA Cup is essentially over for the Kings. It's not mathematically impossible, but the NBA Cup is essentially over for the Kings, right? You fall to 0-2. It's basically a death sentence in group play. The Kings are the only team in Group A without a win, which means the best the Kings can do, best case scenario for the Kings if they want to win. Best case scenario is they beat Portland and Houston. Houston's in first place right now. They're 2-0. You beat Portland and Houston. You need Houston to lose out. And then the Kings have to win via point differential. So the best they can do is tie with Houston. Then they would have to win via point differential. After tonight's loss, the Kings' point differential is -20. Now that doesn't include if the T-Wolves or Clippers win one more game, then they're also tied for that first place spot. And you have to beat them in point differential as well. But if the Clippers or T-Wolves win out, meaning they win their final 2 games of group play, then the Kings have no shot. If any team gets to 3 wins, Kings are done. They cannot advance out of the group. And I promise you, they're not going to be good enough. I'd be very surprised if they are good enough to get one of those, what are they called, like wild card spots, essentially. They're not going to get it. So the Kings, essentially, to have any shot, they have to blow out blow out Portland and blow out Houston. They have to blow them out. So they win and not just get to 2-2. But they win and win by such massive margins that it gets them out of that -20-point differential hole and gets them into like +20 territory. We're talking about winning by an average of 20 points per game in both of these games for them to have any shot. And again, they have to get stupid lucky with all those other teams not getting that 3rd win, or the Kings are done. So yeah, NBA Cup might be a pipe dream. In fact, it is a pipe dream for the Kings this season. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Chime. We've all hit a point where we realize it was time to make serious money moves. Take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Join millions of Chime members who are working on financial progress. Chime helps you progress with fee-free overdraft up to $200. Your next deposit is applied to your balance. You get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. No monthly fees or maintenance fees. Over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. To date, Chime has spotted members over $30 billion. Friends give friends a boost. Eligible members get complimentary boosts to temporarily increase a friend's spot me limit. When you give a boost, they can can boost you back to temporarily raise your limit. The way it works is you set up a direct deposit in your Chime account, and after a qualifying direct deposit of $200 or more, Chime will notify you to enroll in Spot Me. With an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to $200 when you exceed your balance. Your next direct deposit is applied to your negative balance. Chime never charges fees or interest by using Spot Me. Make your fall finances a little greener by working towards your financial goals with Chime. Open your account in just 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Members FDIC. Spot Me eligibility requires an overdraft. Limits apply. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in Spot Me and are subject to monthly limits. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. So this podcast has been nothing but bad news and kind of sour grapes, right, about the Sacramento Kings offensive issues. Is it the end of the world? Is it doom and gloom? No, but I do think we're at a point where it's fair to be a little bit concerned. Here's the good news, though. If the Sacramento Kings are looking for a time to really address this issue and get right, it's now. Because 13 of the Kings' next 19 games are home in Sacramento inside the Golden One Center. You're sleeping in your own bed. You're shooting in your own practice facility. You're playing in your own arena. You're playing in front of your own fans, the best fans in the NBA. This is the time to figure these things out. Forget win totals. I'm not going to say the Kings should win 10 or 9 out of those 13 games. Forget win totals. Forget who they're playing, whether they're playing the best teams in the league or the worst teams in the league. These games are just about the Kings working on themselves and getting right. Hopefully very soon Malik Monk will be coming back again. The initial day was the night of the Oklahoma City Thunder game, which is not Sunday against Brooklyn, but the game following that. So Monk should be back very soon. And hopefully the Kings throughout this stretch can stay healthy and at full strength so they can truly work together on this and don't have to worry about injuries, knock on wood. But what I would like is, and I'll ask you this question, like what would you like to feel better about by the end of this stretch? Forget records, forget who they're playing, score, whatever. Forget all that. Just by the end of this 13 home games in the next 19 games, by the end of this stretch, by the end of these next 19 games, so when the Sacramento Kings are 35 games into the season, what do you want to feel better about? What do you need to feel better about? What I would like to feel better about is I want to feel better about the Kings' overall shooting and ability to take advantage of the stars. That doesn't mean the Kings have to all of a sudden be a 38+% three-point shooting team. That would be fantastic if they could catch fire that much. I just want to see this team knocking down those open threes at a more consistent rate to where it looks steady and it takes advantage of the looks that DeRozan and Fox are getting them. I also want to see the Stars' ability to fit with the overall flow of the offense better. DeMar, De'Aaron, Domantas Sabonis, finding a way to play and have the ball move and everybody touch it the same way when two of those three guys were out, or at least one of those three guys were out over this recent stretch that we saw in Sacramento. So the Stars getting open shots for the role players and the facilitators on the perimeter, and those guys knocking those shots down, but the Stars also fitting into the flow of Sacramento's offense and the pace of Sacramento's offense. I also need to see consistency and a clear impact from this bench, because this ain't going to cut it. Mike needs to be more consistent with his bench and the minutes that he plays them and how he plays them. Trey Lyles, Keon Ellis in particular, those guys need to step up. When Malik Monk gets back, of course, he needs to step up in a major way. And then if it's Alex Len or, I don't know, Jordan McLaughlin or Doug McDermott or whoever's coming in off that second unit, be more consistent, be more impactful. Have a presence on the floor. Do something that you get remembered for. Those are the three main things that I want to feel better about, need to feel better about the Sacramento Kings at the end of this stretch. Because and look, they better be above 500 by the end of the stretch. I don't care about specific record. Again, I don't care which games they win and which teams they beat and which teams they lose to. I don't care. They need to be above 500 in this stretch and at least be in that play-in picture. And I'm talking probably high-end play-in picture. Because after this stretch is done, 13 of their next 18 games after that are on the road. That includes Boston, New York, Denver, OKC, Minnesota, Dallas, and New Orleans twice. I know this Kings team has been good on the road, but if you waste this home stretch and you don't figure these things out and you're not winning basketball games and then you're hoping to get right in that road stretch, even with Devin Carter coming back, man, good luck. Speaking of Devin Carter, want to touch on him really quick. If you were to ask me who do I put the blame on more right now outside of the players, because I do put a lot of blame on the players. Like, they got to hit shots. I put more blame at this point on Monte McNair in the front office than I do Mike Brown. I'm not saying Mike Brown's been perfect, but I don't know how much more this coaching staff can do to get this team to hit shots. Monte McNair put this roster together, and if they're not working, that's on Monte McNair. And there were, again, some clear issues this offseason that we felt the Kings needed to address that Monte McNair did not address. Again, I love the DeMar DeRozan pickup this offseason. Thought it was a great offseason for the Sacramento Kings. But if it does not work, I put that more on Monte than I do on Mike at this point. That's just me at this point. You could disagree. That's totally fine. That's just me at this point. I see a lot of people really starting to get on Monte McNair right now for the Devin Carter selection. And look, I get it. I get it. The Kings are a win-now team. The Kings clearly have a depth issue. And a draft pick, a lottery pick, is a clear opportunity to add depth. And you went and drafted somebody that on draft night you knew was going to miss time, ended up needing shoulder surgery, and is going to miss around half of the season. Meanwhile, guys like Dalton Knecht are out there balling for freaking Los Angeles. I'm not saying Dalton Knecht would be as good for Sacramento as he is in LA. There's no such thing as just plugging and playing and transferring those numbers over. But at least the Kings would have had a body, a wing, who addresses three-point shooting. He was there. The Kings did not take him. They decided with Devin Carter. Now, where I need us to all pump the brakes is we haven't seen Devin Carter play a single game yet. He could come in and be a huge reinforcement for this Kings team and exactly what they need to make Monte McNair look like a genius. And that's what we should all be rooting for, even if we weren't happy with the pick. That's what we should all be rooting for, 100%. But I do agree that it is tough right now with the Kings rookie on the shelf, depth being an issue, watching other rookies that were selected after Devin Carter making meaningful impacts on their respective teams. And look, nobody's looking at Devin Carter to be a savior, because if you are, then you're probably an early lottery team. You're picking like top 3, top 4, and you're in very bad shape. Nobody's looking at Devin Carter the same way we were looking at Fox when he came into the league. But you'd like to have something, and right now you can't get anything because literally that player is not playing. So I understand frustrations. I will say, let's not make too harsh of judgments, especially towards Devin Carter when we haven't seen him play a game yet. But I understand your frustrations. You want to share those frustrations with me? You want to share the frustrations about tonight's game, your concerns that you have about the shooting, whatever it is, let it fly. Let's talk about it. At MattGeorgeSack on Twitter or Blue Sky. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, get loose with your comments in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. I'll be inside the Golden One Center on Sunday, so hopefully I'll see you at the game, and hopefully we're talking about a Kings win. Unfortunately, it'll have to be at the expense of Jordy Fernandez, former Sacramento Kings associate head coach. Love Jordy, but his team needs to lose. Kings need to win on Sunday, and hopefully they do. I'll be at that game, have a post-game podcast for you as usual after that. Appreciate you. Can't wait to have you join me on that next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.